Hey guys, what's up? Excoundrel here. Today I'm going to be doing a predicted tier list. This is a tier list just based off the patch notes and some initial play on the update. I'm going to be doing it for every role. I'm going to revise this later into the update after I've done my top heroes in every role video. This is just a predicted tier list. We don't really have the data to be able to say which heroes are super good right now, but you can see this is the format that I've been using with the S, A, B, C, D, E, F tiers, and you can read exactly what they mean. Realistically, it's not going to be absolute pick or ban on S tier. That just generally means what I think is the best in that particular role. But I will talk through my thoughts as we go through. I'm going to start off with the bot lane carry. Kinetic, I still think is going to be super strong this update. She didn't really get touched over the last two updates, so there's no reason for her to ever change position. I still think Kinetic is going to be in a really good position. I think Gwen and Baron are just about up there. I think they'll also be favoured very heavily in this coming update. Baron especially, he had a series of buffs that have made him very strong, and Gwen also had a big buff to her Buckshot Bonanza, which also made her passive, which made her really good. I think Ringo is a very staple weapon power carry in the bot lane. Does need some protection though, as he is fairly vulnerable. And then we've got this sort of addition of Ilva, Idris, and Vox. Vox, I think, has had a couple of changes that have made him pretty good over the last couple of updates. He got nerfed, and then he got buffed, and then he got buffed slightly on the last update as well. So I think Vox is probably going to be in a pretty solid position. Then we've got Silvernail, who I think's been nerfed too much to be like a super strong pick in the bot lane, but I still think he's very viable. Weapon Power Kestrel has been buffed quite considerably, so if you're a good Weapon Power Kestrel player, you might be able to play her quite a little bit more on this coming update. And Kensei got a damage rework. Now, I'm putting him in B, although he is very specific. He's not as good versus squishies, but he's a tank shredder. So if you're going to see a lot of tanks coming up on the enemy team, then actually Kensei comes out as a pretty solid choice. Then we've got the likes of Weapon Power Sky and Adagio. I think Weapon Power Adagio is good, and he's very much a lane bully, but he's kind of North America dominated. You don't really see much of it on Europe, for instance. And Sky, I've always felt like, is a specific counter in the Weapon Power carry section. Saw has been given a lot of CP buffs, but realistically his weapon power is exactly the same as it always has been. Saw is like one of those picks where you pick him, you have to dominate your lane, you have to take about 3 turrets in 10 minutes, otherwise he's just going to end up being useless. And then there's like Petal, who her extended range can sometimes be useful, but you know, in most cases, if you pick Petal as a weapon power carry, you're going to do really badly. And then finally, right down the bottom, I like to include Varia because she's a bit of a meme, and they kind of gutted her weapon power build path on 3.9. Still can play her because of the attack speed steroid that her ultimate gives her, but honestly, for the most part, you're just way better off sticking to CP Varia, which CP Varia isn't great either right now, but irrespective of that, yeah. Alright, we're going to move on to mid laners, and I'm going to start to talk about the ones who I feel should be right at the top, because I think it used to be Scarf, and Scarf was kind of alone up there, but he had several nerfs over the last few updates, and I think overall there have been some pretty significant changes. So I think personally, Magnus sits at the top of the mid lane, and then you have the likes of Scarf, Celeste, and Samuel down at the bottom side of things. Meline in between S and A tier. I think Meline is super strong, and I think she's going to be seen in the mid lane quite a lot. Then down at the B tier side of things, you're going to have the likes of CP Vox, Anchor, Varia, Lyra, and Lorelei, all of which are probably still viable, although CP Lyra did take a bit of a hit. Then you've got CP Adagio, CP Idris. I think CP Idris probably could come up a couple of tiers. It's difficult to say. The problem is in the mid lane, he gets battered by everybody. It's really difficult to keep CP Idris healthy in the early game. Then you've got the likes of the CP Saw that has been changed over. I don't know how strong CP Saw is yet. People keep raving about it. I think he's probably better off in the top lane, for instance. Reza also could be a viable CP mid pick. And then you've got the kind of going down towards the meme level picks. And I'm talking about the likes of Kinetic and Ringo, who, you know, Ringo is really only relying on his ultimate, and he's got his B, but he is kind of like a one-trick pony in terms of what he can do CP. Kinetic, again, is more viable weapon power than she ever will be CP, but she has that ability to poke out pretty heavily with her A, so it's always worth considering. And then you've got Baron, who's just awful CP now, unfortunately. He got gutted pretty hard. And right down at the bottom, CP Gwen, who's also pretty bad. So that would be my mid lane tier list. I think Magnus is absolute pick or ban. Meline is definitely up there. Then you've got the likes of Scarf, who's still good. Not great, but still good. Well, he is still really good, but just has been hit a little bit harder than he had done before. Celeste, still incredible. Samuel, still really good. And then the B tier picks are likely ones that you might see as well. I still think they're all incredibly viable too. You might be more likely to see the likes of Vox than Lyra or Lorelei, for instance, but I wanted to sort of include them across that same tier. So that is the mid lane. We're going to move on to the top lane now, and I think there is some pretty standout performers on the top side of the map, being that I think Lance, Lorelei, and Grumpjaw are still all really, really good top laners on this current update. And, Lorelei, I think, still didn't really get nerfed on 3.0. She was still super viable on 3.9, so I still think she's going to be a great top laner. Grumpjaw and Lance got massive buffs over the last couple of updates. He's super good. I'm putting Sang Feng between S and A because I think the utility that he brings to the team, as well as his raw damage, I just think it's really strong, so I'm putting Sang Feng up the top. It might turn out that Sang Feng isn't as good as I previously anticipated, but that's where I'm putting him. A tier, you're going to have the likes of Adagio, Reza, who I think is very strong this update. I don't know if Reza is pick or ban worthy. It's difficult to tell, but I definitely think he's really strong. And then you've got Grace. Jewel got some nerfs, and I think Jewel's likely going to be better in the jungle than she is in top lane, but I still don't think Jewel is out of the meta. She's still going to be good. And I've got Anchor, Meline, and Glaive. Glaive could potentially be a bit higher, but I'm going to leave it as it is for now. C tier are just like your standard picks. Yates, Inara, Arden, who got nerfed pretty heavily over the last couple of updates, especially his weapon power build path. I think Blackfeather CP, especially in the top lane, could be good. Rhyme, despite his nerfs, is probably still okay in the top lane in certain scenarios. I'm putting the CP Saw up there because people have been raving about him. I'm not sure how viable he is, but he definitely seems like with 5 Mad Cannon charges, he could be pretty dumb. And then you've got stuff that's more specific, like Flicker and Catherine, who, for the most part are going to be there in certain scenarios. Maybe you pick Catherine and you don't want to play her captain, so you can flex her top. And Cruel and Rona coming in at the end. CP Cruel maybe will prove me wrong, but come on, let's be realistic. CP Cruel is pretty hot garbage. I could be completely wrong on that, but I'm just going to go out there on a limb and say CP Cruel's garbage. So that is my list. I think Lance and Grumpjaw are going to be very, very common in the top side of the map. I think Sang Feng, if you can get your hands on him, genuinely could be a really, really good pick because the base damage on his abilities is so good. It takes a while to charge up your B, but you combo with some CC from your team, and you're sitting pretty in terms of sort of putting insane damage out. I played him mid the other day. Didn't go well, but we still won because, his ultimate and his combo and his CC and everything is just super strong. Alright, let's take a look at the jungle. Now, I put everything in the jungle in one go because I separate jungle out into several different sections. I think in terms of mages, Meline is probably going to be your go-to because she's just really strong on this update. I then think you can play like Samuel, Lorelei, Rhyme, and Jewel all very well in the jungle on the mage side of things. Scarf and Celeste, much better off in the mid lane, but you can play them jungle if you have to. You have to start with Stormguard Banner, though, still, realistically, in most cases, and that's going to kind of slow down your jungle clear in 5v5, and also your scaling. And then Kestrel. Now, Kestrel actually got some CP buffs on the last update, so whether or not they're good enough, I don't think they are, but because one of the major reasons you picked CP Kestrel was because of her active camo. They gave her about, I think it was like 20% scaling back to her Glimmer Shot, which means that she might do a bit more damage, but you've still got half your kit missing that you used to have, so not sure that Kestrel's going to be like super strong. Assassins. Now, Koshka was actually surprisingly good on 3.9 and 3.10. And so without changes, I think Koshka's probably still in a great position. Anka, Reza, and Ilva all, I think, are going to be very good assassin-type junglers on the next update. Again, I'm hesitant to put Reza anywhere in terms of pick or ban right now because I don't know how good he is. I haven't played too much of him to be able to tell, but this is all predicted, so I'm likely going to be changing this when we come to understanding a bit more of the meta next week. Alpha I've put right down at the bottom there because she had a slight buff, and I'm sure people are going to say, where's Alpha? I think Alpha could work. The buff to her A means you can use your gap closing ability a bit more frequently. I just don't think she's going to be like incredibly strong. Tank junglers. I think Lance and Grumpjaw are just great this update. Lance especially, I think, is just busted. Below that, you've got Sangfeng, who I think can work in the jungle really nicely, as along with Glaive and Inara. Below that is going to be the likes of Batiste, Flicker, Yates, Tony, who I think all can do well in the jungle. And I'm going to put Fortress in there. I'm putting Fortress in there because he had a buff to his A range, and I think CP Fortress could genuinely come back, especially with the fact that we all now have to go Stormguard banner. So yeah, I genuinely think Fortress could be a comeback jungler in 5v5 this update, so I'm putting him tentatively in B. And then we have Grace. Grace is okay. She kind of does her role. She'd probably be much better off in the top lane or even in the support role. Speaking of captains, S tier captains this update for me. Lorelei, because she was unchanged on the last update and she was still super strong on 3.10. Lyra and Adagio, because Iron Guard contract is gone, and healing is going to be 10 times more important now, especially with the barrier that you provide, having the basic attack barrier built in that goes into Rook's Decree, which both Lorelei and Adagio can abuse in the mid lane heavily. So I think Lorelei and Adagio are going to be great captains. Followed up by Churnwalker and Yates. Churnwalker might be S tier. It's difficult to tell because he gets banned all the time. So yeah, you probably would put Churnwalker up in that area. Whether we'll see Churnwalker banned every time this update, we'll have to see. B tier, I'm putting Lance up because of his base damage buff. He actually does a lot of damage even in the captain role. Arden and Finn also still super solid captains. Going to keep them all on that tier for the current moment. I think you'll probably see a bit more of Arden than some of the upper tier picks because he's easier to play. And you might see a lot of Lance because people like playing him just because he's a bit of a playmaker. C tier, Grace, Catherine, Fortress. I think Grace could do with being a bit further up this tier list, but Fortress I'm bringing back in because the A range increase, he will work in some very specific dive compositions, and actually, you know, he genuinely could be viable. I'm not saying he's going to be overpowered like he used to be, but he could be viable, which is something that we haven't really had from Fortress in a very long time. Flicker, yep, chilling down there in D tier. I mean, he got nerfed over the course of the last few updates pretty heavily, and I think most people are more likely to play him jungle. I don't think he's super solid in the top lane anymore, but most people are likely to play him jungle. So we'll run with that. Again, this is all predicted. And down at the bottom, things like Batiste, Tony, and Grumpjaw. Viable captains, but you've just got better picks open to you if you're going to go for a captain with one of those. And they are also more likely to be better off in jungle or top lane roles rather than being a captain. But if you have to pick them, they're there. So this is my total predicted tier list, and this is just based on speculation on the update notes and a little bit of data that we've seen so far from 4.0. But for the most part, I will be updating this when we're a bit further into the update next week. Again, Steam launch has happened. We're likely to see a lot more players over the next few months grinding their way up, and this is just a very basic and good guide to help you pick the right heroes when you're entering that ranked or even in your casual games. Okay, wonderful. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you soon.